Right, shall we round things off with a look at the fourth protocol then?
Please.
Yes. The mid-1980s, and in the Soviet Union, the head of the KGB, General Govorshin, police squad's Alan North, of all people, puts into motion a plan to make the United States seem negligent and careless in its ownership of nuclear weapons, with the end goal being the dissolution of NATO. To this end, he sends Pierce Brosnan's Major Valery Petrovsky, an expert in British customs, to the UK to construct an atomic bomb and cause its detonation in or near to the United States Air Force Base at the fictional RAF Baywaters. A cunningly disguised name which bears no resemblance whatsoever to the real RAF Bentwaters. Get around that one, lawyers. Attempting to discover the details of the plot is Michael Caine's John Preston, whose serendipitous sideways promotion at MI5 leads to him stumbling onto a Soviet agent posing as a sailor who had in his possession a disc of polonium, an item whose sole purpose, we are told, is to form part of the detonation mechanism for an atomic bomb. He brings his discovery to unreasonable arsehole boss, played by Julian Glover, the same person who had had him moved out of his original job. But unreasonable arsehole boss comes to the mind-bendingly stupid conclusion that Preston has made up the plot, and presumably the polonium disc, in order to gain promotion or favour. This is, sadly, the hardest thing to buy in any of these films, with the exception of the 1997 Abomination. These Frederick Forsyth films, and the books they are based on, again, I have to say, are marked out by how grounded and plausible they are. So, going around UAB to Ian Richardson's Sir Nigel Irvine to get the resources that he needs, Preston tracks down Petrovsky and, sorry to spoil anything here, stops 5,000 people from being killed and large parts of Oxfordshire being rendered uninhabitable for centuries. There is a final twist though, when Preston follows up on a hunch as to why some of his investigation was easier than it might otherwise have been. Also, unless I missed something, this film tells us that there is a fourth protocol in the nuclear weapons agreements between the USSR and NATO, but neglects to tell us what that fourth protocol is. Curious.
I had to look it up.
It's on Wikipedia, it's not available.
Which is a bit fascinating.
Good. I thought maybe my attention had drifted for a crucial nanosecond or something when he explained it, but no.
It's also a protocol that you know would have been drafted and proposed by the Brits, because it's very, but come on, amongst all this nuclear profiteroles. Amongst the nuclear profiteroles, Marquis of Queensberry rules, boys. Let's not... Let's agree that we should only throw nuclear weapons at each other, not sneak them in the back door. Deary me. You can imagine everyone else around the table now going, oh, sure, we'll sign up saying we totally won't do that. Suckers. Sorry, Drew, had you finished?
I didn't have an awful lot more to say about this film. I enjoyed it, apart from that Julian Glover's character bafflingly not accepting that. It's every bit as stupid as that whole Harry Potter Cornelius Fudge, let's not believe any of the evidence thing that we've railed about in the previous incarnations of the podcast.
Yeah, there's kind of a lot going on, and also not a lot going on with this movie. I remember this. I don't know why I've never seen it all the way from start to finish. I think I've tried watching it on TV sort of like late at night at some point and fallen asleep halfway through it. So this is the first time that I've watched it from start to finish. It's not the greatest movie ever, and I recall it having a pretty poor reputation as it goes, but I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I think Michael Caine's fun. Ian Richardson's always fantastic value. Pierce Brosnan's, he's no Taffin.
No, don't. Because through the whole movie I kept thinking, I just want someone to turn up and knock on his door to conduct an investigation, and for his answer to be, "What happens in this town is none of your business."
That's how I really wanted them. Somebody say, well, maybe you shouldn't be living here.
But yeah, Pierce Brosnan very much on the ascendant, and like, forget this is very much from the period where Michael Caine was basically working for food, or certainly like a new outhouse or something like that. He's not terrible, but you can very much tell he's coasting and that he's done this thing a lot of times before. He's not really invested in it. I mean, it's somewhere. His role is somewhere between the Ipcris File and the Swarm in terms of how much he's.
That's a hell of a continuum. be honest.
in terms of how much you can tell he's really invested in this role. You can see the point in the movie at which about halfway through he's like, "Oh, who cares?" And actually, the person who seems to be enjoying himself most in this movie is Barry, his cohort who drives the transit van, and who's absolutely loving throwing that transit van around.
You say drive.
Yes.
That's a very loose use of that word.
Yes, he's projecting that transit van along a series of intersecting vectors towards a final goal. It's an interesting film, and again, it's that thing of it's maybe not so much about the spycraft and about the sort of the deductive reasoning that we found so enjoyable in A Jackal, but it does. I think that, perhaps this is the film with certainly the most, in the short term at least, the sort of most high stakes happening in it, so it feels elevated by sense of that, and it's portrayed in a way that is, I suppose, sadly for the time, quite sort of believable. It's easy to imagine that this might have been a workable plot.
Again, nuclear bombs generally are in the realm of the incredibly far-fetched. This is a film that managed to make a nuclear bomb. Oh yeah, that actually seems not unreasonable. Yeah. The satisfaction of seeing them having sneaked bits of the casing and then headlights and things.
And the mechanics of it, I mean, technically, yes, it's a pretty good representation of what a working sort of small portable nuclear weapon would actually look like, and the elements it would be predicated upon. It's not some stupid Hollywood bleep bloop thing with a digital countdown timer on it that looks like that looks like some sort of glorified, I don't know, techno dildo or something like that. Nuclear bombs.
I've only ever seen the base model techno dildos. I'm not sure what the glorified ones are like. Are they bejeweled?
Portable nuclear weapons are so sexy. So that is, it's sort of I think the high stakes are enough, and it's the sort of race against time element is worked well enough, if nothing else, that it remains quite compelling throughout. And it's just always interesting to see Pierce Brosnan in that sort of in between obscurity and superstardom period, sort of plying his trade and being devastatingly handsome.
Is this pre-Remington Steele or just round about the same time?
I want to say round about the same time. So it was after the Long Good Friday where he sort of popped up.
And it's round about the same time as
before
Timothy
Taffin.
Dalton's Bond, because that's when they wanted him originally.
Yeah, that's right.
This was either after or just at the end of Remington Steele.
Yeah. Right, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it's a less interesting film than, for example, A Dogs of War, but it's much easier to enjoy it. It's perhaps a bit more brainless in a way that you can enjoy this without really having been... It's not setting out to challenge anything. It's like, nuclear bombs we've all decided are a bad thing and we should stop them. There's not going to be an awful lot of disagreement on that. So there's no moral ambiguity for
there's no good lot of this. There's no good application of a nuclear weapon.
So it's just a pretty straightforward thriller. The stakes are much higher, as you say, than everything else, but that's enough to keep it going, and Michael Caine's got enough charisma. I think it helps that the start of this film is really quite an interesting introduction to his character, and that kind of lets it get away with an awful lot of rather less interesting stuff towards the end, where he's basically just running from point to point going, I stop him, and it's a bit less interesting for a lot of reasons at that point, but yeah, there's just enough of the sort of time pressure element to keep it moving, and it's an enjoyable enough watch for the 2 hours-ish, I think it is. I will probably never go back to this or think about it again, but I enjoyed watching it. So
there's something just fundamentally compelling about even when he's coasting along in the breeze about watching Michael Caine be really insubordinate.
Yes.
It's just something that he does incredibly well. Just that smarmy sort of self-confidence that he has one up on his superiors kind of thing. It's just compelling. I would watch 2 hours of that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I do. You're saying about like that portion at the start when he breaks into Anton Rogers' flat. It really sets up the start.
Sounds like a terrible euphemism.
The only problem I have with that is that they use that to set up that he's competent, but also for Ian Richardson's character to say that, this gives me some leverage over the deputy of the KGB. And then you see a wee bit of the deputy of the KGB in Russia talking to Ned Beatty, as
I
a
was
Russian.
going to say, this film contains Ned Beatty playing a character called Pavel Petrovich.
Yes.
Approved.
We should perhaps mention those accents because they are very low, aren't they?
Yes. What this film
comrade.
needed was John Voight to keep everybody in check
Yes.
with the accents. Yes, this is very much the antithesis of the Odessa File.
Yeah. Again, still not as bad as the Jackal, but that's on a different level. Yeah, so there's that sort of setup for that, and then it's largely forgotten for the entire film after
Yeah.
that. And it gets brought back at the end, but not in a kind of believable in terms of political intrigue way and political leverage, but not in a particularly satisfying way. It feels like it's getting a wee bit too close to something like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but not well.
Yeah.
And it's probably the biggest problem I have with that, because it set that up and then it's largely dropped, but it's still quite an entertaining film. It's quite compelling. You want to see what happens and how. So it keeps you hooked quite well. Even if it seems to sort of drop some plot strands that make a whole 20-minute section at the beginning of the film seem meaningless.
It's always nice to see Joanna Cassidy popping up as well, because I feel like she didn't work all that much. It's perhaps odd that she did pop up in this for that reason. But there's actually one of the more interesting things in the movie is her character's demise. She makes an interesting choice at that point to actually, well, we are to suppose that she bizarrely makes a choice to try and warn Petrovsky.
The key.
Yeah.
He shoots her.
Bizarrely, and there's something like absolutely tragic about that that makes me find her character a lot more interesting than she might have been. But yeah, it's just an interesting film. Again, very much like the Odessa File, I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I think I probably should have done. But yeah, Ned Beatty, Pavel Petrovich.
That's strange casting. I mean, if he tried to doing an accent, I didn't actually really notice it because it just wasn't there. It's like people say that Sean Connery tries to do an accent in The Untouchables. Like, really? No, he doesn't.
He's just really out of place among the rest of the cast when you look at the cast.
It's odd casting.
Was he? I get the impression. I've got a horrible hunch. Was he like? Is he a mate of Michael Caine's or something? I know who'd be good. I know who does a great Russian accent.
I actually don't think he actually really tries particularly to do a Russian accent, so it doesn't bother me much. But
I've got a friend who needs a new car as well. Get Ned Beatty on the phone. Yeah, I've got a funny feeling he might have been shoehorned in there at like Michael Caine's behest or something. I don't know, because he's otherwise quite out of sticks out a bit. But there you go.